Thank you. Danny raised a number of very disturbing metaphors about housebroken dragons and what have you that I'm not going to dwell on. But I will be, though, unlike Danny, a cheerleader for this initiative. It's because, basically, the way I've always looked at the issue of Jerusalem, particularly the Old City, it's one of the most difficult issues, and at the same time, it's one of the most straightforward issues. It's very difficult, specifically because of the issue of sovereignty. It's an irrational issue when it comes to sovereignty. There is no rational way of looking at it. It doesn't lend itself to traditional interest-based negotiations. Ultimately, it is something that's going to be a political decision decided by the leaders as part of a grand bargain. And as such, no second track, no academic work can actually resolve this issue. A lot has been written about it. I think the debating points are there on both sides. It's now up to the leaders to decide on it, and there's nothing more, in my view, to be said about the issue of sovereignty at this stage. And it's smart from the initiative to basically park this issue and leave it to those who are capable of dealing with it. However, the issue of Jerusalem is also very straightforward, in that, as Gilad said, we've always known, since Camp David, that ultimately the Old City will have to be subject to some special regime. Irrespective of what we call who is going to have sovereignty on which part of it, it is going to be subject to a special regime, and this special regime is something that we can rationally look at, something that lends itself to comparative studies, to looking at best practices, to basically bring in expertise to develop this issue. And I think the initiative did a wonderful job of navigating this difficulty and, at the same time, adding to our knowledge and creating a real toolbox, the first one of its kind, that will enable us to deal with the practical issues involving the Old City. The initiative, I think, is very valuable on two levels. On a political level, it is very important at this time, when everyone's saying that Jerusalem is impossible to resolve, there's no resolution for Jerusalem, it's too complicated, there's so many issues, to have something like this that says, no, there are solutions. There are practical solutions. The issue is not with the substance, the issue is with the decision, and the issue then becomes a political one that the two sides, as well as outsiders, can start maneuvering towards resolving. So it has a very important political symbolism. It sends a very important political message. But more importantly, I think it has very relevant and very timely negotiation value in one of two ways. If the Palestinians and Israelis, and right now the American administration that's shepherding this process, are wise in their approach to negotiations, I think it's very important to look at some of these practical issues from this day, start examining them in a rational, cool way, start looking at some of the tools, some of the ideas, react to them, tweak them, refine them, culturally translate them, to come up with a workable agreement that will satisfy both parties. And I think, by the way, that even if we were to start discussing these practical issues today, the two sides are incapable of putting the first proposal on the table. When we were negotiating, even though we knew that the special regime is essential, for political reasons, as officials, it was very difficult for us to start even developing some of these conceptual issues. So this at least creates a framework for the negotiators to look at, react, and start developing. This is a best-case scenario, where the issue is being discussed right now by the negotiators, while the issue of sovereignty is being delayed until the leaders come in and discuss it. More likely, however, the way that Palestinian and Israeli negotiations work, this issue will not be touched until the leaders come in and decide on sovereignty, and then we're going to have, a week for the negotiators to come in and actually put the practical issues on the table. And this is actually what we faced in many previous negotiations. Geneva, by the way, worked similar to this pattern. And that's when this kind of initiative becomes extremely valuable. Because absent this, absent the ideas that were given here, the negotiators will have to come up with something that at best will be half-baked, will be unworkable, and will not be practical. So I think that for political and for negotiation reasons, this initiative is extremely valuable, the timing is extremely helpful, and I can be nothing but a cheerleader for it. But we've been talking, by and large, so far about the distant future. I don't believe that we're going to resolve the issue of Jerusalem or get a permanent status deal anytime soon. And I would like to have a few words, even though it's outside the remit of this session, to talk about what we need to do from now until then, until we get to the end game, to the end deal. As progress happens, as negotiations continue, Jerusalem, in my view, will continue to become the magnet for provocation. it is too valuable a location for people not to use to undermine, explode, provoke, try to derail the process. And we have to come up with mechanisms that will stabilize Jerusalem until we get to that point. And provocations, in my mind, come from two different sources. They can be either officially sanctioned, and we've seen that recently with the construction in Jerusalem. And I think the way the administration dealt with it has been extremely useful. Attach a price tag to any official action that will create tensions in Jerusalem. And I just hope that the administration continues in its firm approach to this issue. But the second kind of provocations, the more difficult one, is the one that's going to come from spoilers. Palestinian terrorists, Jewish terrorists, external people who are going to come and try to basically create incidents in Jerusalem to derail the process. And for this, I think we need to start introducing a new concept, a new tool to the negotiations that so far has not existed during the time that we were negotiating. There has to be a protocol, a mechanism for dealing with these kinds of provocations between the two parties, open lines of communications, security protocols, to basically deal with the security as well as the political implications of any of these actions that will inevitably happen or at least be attempted in Jerusalem. As we do that, though, and as we build up to the point where we have to decide on Jerusalem, and in addition to the kind of diplomatic points that I mentioned, I think the two parties have a responsibility. And here I will have to take issue with what Gilad said, and I will have to echo what Nazmi said. It's important, as we build towards a deal on Jerusalem, for both sides to start conditioning their own public to accept the legitimate narrative and the legitimate claim that the other side has on Jerusalem. The narratives and the attachment to Jerusalem is not quantifiable. 3,000 years, 500 years, it's not about quantification. It's not something that we can take and weigh in in some kind of scale. It is about attachment. When people feel strongly about attachment to this place, we have to take it seriously. Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims feel very strongly about Jerusalem, the same way that Jews feel very strongly about Jerusalem. And as such, I think it's very important for the leaders on both sides to start clearly talking about that both sides have a legitimate claim on it. However, despite the claim, which will be part of the narrative, there has to be a practical solution. And I think that the Canadian initiative, while it doesn't provide a perfect solution, at least gives us the toolbox that we can start working with, reacting to, developing, towards building something that's workable in that city. So thank you very much.